In some places, night is simply the time when there is no light. But in Baltimore, night is the golden hour for nightmares to come alive. When seemingly ordinary streets suddenly turn into hellish traps, places where even the police hesitate to enter, not on some distant front line, nor in a conflict zone on the other side of the globe. It's all less than an hour's drive from Washington. Baltimore, a city located right in the heart of America, is now a place where people have to be careful with every step they take when night falls. In this place, many families no longer dare to let their children play outside after dark. Many convenience stores have closed permanently simply because they couldn't withstand the repeated robberies. And there are nights when police cars just speed by, as if their presence is no longer enough to bring safety. What's really going on here? Why has a city that was once the pride of the Northeast region fallen into such a state of fear? In this video, we'll delve into the dark side of Baltimore to understand why this city has become a symbol of the quiet collapse of the American urban dream. Be careful with every step you take as you head to Baltimore, because every careless step could make you one of the 63 unlucky people whose photos will be featured on the morning news. Baltimore is currently the fourth most dangerous city in the United States, behind only Memphis, Oakland, and St. Louis, based on the latest FBI statistics on serious crime and property offenses. The estimated rate of becoming a victim of crime here is 1 in 63, a chilling figure for anyone who has ever believed that security is a basic right. For a time, Baltimore was absent from the list of most dangerous cities, and that absence was once considered a light at the end of the tunnel. However, by 2025, the city had returned to an undesirable state, a testament to its inability to retain what was once the core of urban life: order and trust. The bitter truth is, the sense of safety in Baltimore is not uniform. A visitor in Little Italy shared that they felt safe due to the increased police presence, but also acknowledged the frequent appearance of riffraff, a euphemistic term for vagrants of unknown origin. On the contrary, a resident of Federal Hill recounted how he was once pelted with bricks through his window, an experience that made him no longer dare to leave the lights on downstairs at night. These contrasting stories not only reflect two different worlds within the same city, but also express a society divided even in its definition of safety. What Baltimore residents expressed while living in the city's instability wasn't just about feelings. It led to concrete action, people and businesses leaving the city. From 1970 to the present, Baltimore has lost over 37% of its population, a figure that not only reflects geographical shifts, but is a clear sign of a retreat in faith and spirit. What remains are hundreds of abandoned homes, empty streets, and commercial areas no longer visited by anyone. A city that was once the industrial heart of the East is now nothing but emptiness and a despair difficult to name. Today, Baltimore is not just a city on the brink of collapse, but also a dark chapter of modern America confronting itself. A place where the American dream, working hard, building a decent life, and living in safety is no longer a reality for many. So, if a city that was once a symbol of diligent labor, the aspiration to move forward, and faith in the law, now becomes a symbol of flight and helplessness, what does that say about America today? And if that can happen to Baltimore, is where you live really as safe as you think? Without leaving the United States, you can still encounter scenes that make you feel as if you've been transported to a refugee camp in a foreign land. But this isn't a border region, nor is it a ghost town. This is Baltimore, a city slowly sinking into darkness. Homelessness and poverty are not only taking over every street corner, but are also redefining urban life itself. Although the number of homeless people in Baltimore has decreased by about 30% in the past 5 years, on any given night in 2025, there will still be between 1,500 and 1,600 people living without homes in the city. Those numbers don't tell the whole story, because behind every tent is a life that had a different beginning. A worker who lost their job due to chronic illness. A single mother who couldn't afford the rent increase. A veteran who didn't qualify for medical services. It's not their story. It's stories that are getting closer to us. Approximately 20.3% of Baltimore residents are living below the poverty line, nearly 60% higher than the national average. These numbers are even worse for families with children. 23% of households with children under 18, as America's future generation of children grows up in poverty. When the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment reaches $1,350 per month, and the median household income is only around $59,600, the gap between housing and affordability becomes a chasm that not everyone can bridge. For decades, over 13,000 abandoned homes and buildings have remained unhealed scars on the map of Baltimore. Most of these abandoned properties are concentrated in areas like Sandtown, Winchester, Harlem Park, Southwest Baltimore, and Greenmount East, where the majority of residents are people of color, and poverty has become a generational legacy. Those areas are not only lacking investment, they are also lacking hope. When the streets no longer have grocery stores, nearby schools or banks, all that remains is an emptiness filled with tents, trash, and a feeling of abandonment. Over the 5 years from 2018 to 2023, the city only added 450 social housing units, while over 20,000 households remained on the waiting list. Meanwhile, the newly built high-rise buildings were not for them, but for those who could afford rents far exceeding the average salary. It's as if Baltimore is building a future for people who have never lived here, while the past and present are left behind. If a city once known as the gateway to the East has now become a place where the poor live on the margins, even in their own birthplace, are we truly developing urban areas? Or are we erecting barriers to prevent the poor from finding a place in their own city? There are places where, when night falls, people don't just close their doors, they close their hearts as well. In Sandtown, Winchester, there isn't enough light to illuminate every corner of the street. And sometimes, it's not the people who are afraid to come out, but the police force that hesitates to enter. When West Baltimore is mentioned, many people immediately think of Sandtown, Winchester, a small neighborhood just about half a square mile in size, but carrying within it an entire urban tragedy. The estimated population ranges from 6,900 to over 9,000 people, most of whom are residents who have been connected to this land for many generations. But in what was once the center of community life, music, religion, and neighborly love, it is now known for other reasons. Street corners lacking security and stories that no one dares to share with anyone. The unemployment rate here once reached 52% of the working-age population, a figure that makes any recovery efforts too fragile. The average household income is only about $47,000, which is much lower than what is needed to maintain a stable standard of living in a city that is constantly changing. Nearly 40% of households earn less than $25,000 per year, while average rent prices range from $980 to $1,350, a disparity significant enough to cause many families to live in constant worry. More than half of the residents are renters, and for them, every night is a trade-off between safety and survival. Many people choose to add an outdoor camera, not even to protect their property, but just to know what's happening on the other side of the door. In some areas, the police presence is thinning, not because they don't care, but because they are overwhelmed by challenges that exceed their individual capacity to intervene. In such circumstances, solar-powered flashlights from Jackery, affordable smart locks from Wise, or mini smoke detectors from Kidder are not just conveniences, but a minimum sense of security for many households. These aren't luxury items. They're things that help people maintain faith in the place they call home. But what's even more terrifying is the feeling that this place is no longer an exception. Because if places that once had a sense of community, tradition, and cultural foundation, like Sandtown Winchester, are also losing their luster, then where is safe? And if both the light and the presence of the forces that maintain order were to gradually recede, what would fill that void? There's a bitter truth. In Baltimore, schools are no longer places that nurture the future, but seem to be becoming places that silently witness a generation being abandoned. In theory, school is the starting point of hope, but in many areas of Baltimore, especially West Baltimore and inner city districts, that hope is fading with each passing day. Baltimore, once a breeding ground for activists, musicians, and engineers from the public system, is experiencing an unprecedented education crisis. In 2025, 48% of students were chronically absent, the highest rate in the state of Maryland. Without presence, how can you talk about achievement? Despite receiving significant funding, this city still ranks near the bottom of the National Academic Performance Table, with no improvement in entrance and graduation exam scores. Post-pandemic budget pressures, coupled with concerns about fairness and the allocation of support, have led to the stagnation of many essential programs. The staff shortage only makes things worse. More than 17,000 students are being affected by the shortage of teachers, social workers, and school psychologists. Meanwhile, the outdated administrative system, high management costs, and late payments have discouraged many teachers, with some abandoning the profession they once idealized altogether. Amidst these gaps, affordable learning devices like Amazon Fire tablets, noise-cancelling headphones from JBL, or free online learning apps like Khan Academy or Duolingo are not just tools, they are lifelines for low-income students. Baltimore once prided itself on being the birthplace of social activists, artists, and entrepreneurs. Individuals who emerged from the public education system armed with faith. Now, many children graduate without enough points to attend community college, or simply lack the basic skills to apply for jobs. They are not stupid, they just fell behind too early, too quickly, and too quietly. And if education was once the promise that anyone could rise up, what are the empty classrooms, dusty whiteboards, and closed libraries in Baltimore telling the next generation? Is it possible that what we are losing is not just the ability to teach literacy, but the ability to believe that every child deserves a real opportunity? If numbers could speak, the population of Baltimore would be a desperate whisper for the past half-century. From the 1970s to the present, Baltimore has lost a third of its population, the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of people who once called this place home. It's not just geographical movements, but a silent stream of retreating hope. The houses are abandoned. Shops that were once bustling are now covered in dust with sale signs hanging limply. An entire city, once dubbed the industrial gem of the East Coast, now resembles a stage after a performance, with the lights off and the audience gone. Migration doesn't happen overnight. It started with job losses, continued with declining school quality, and then accelerated when security and urban infrastructure were no longer guaranteed. Families with means, or simply enough motivation, found a way out. Those who stayed were mostly those who had no other choice. And for them, every day is a survival problem. How to keep their homes, pay the bills, protect their children, and hold on to a piece of the old American dream. Neighborhoods once bustling like Highlandtown, Cherry Hill, or Greenmount are now quiet in the late afternoon. In some areas, you can drive through an entire block without seeing a soul. It's not because everything is peaceful, it's because life has departed. However, within that picture, there are still a few bright spots. Silent recovery efforts are underway. Many Baltimore residents are transitioning to remote work, leveraging platforms like Upwork, Fiverr, or Remote OK to escape dependence on the local labour market. Work-from-home equipment like FlexiSpot standing desks, ergonomic chairs from Secret Lab, and BenQ anti-glare desk lamps are being sought after by many urban residents. Not just for work, but also to feel that they still have a chance to stay. For the elderly, many have transitioned to more compact living models, such as tiny houses, or living with their children and grandchildren in lower-cost states like Pennsylvania or West Virginia. Moving services like U-Haul or storage facilities like public storage are seeing a slight increase in customers, indicating that the trend of leaving the city is still ongoing, albeit quietly. But there are also those who stay, not because they can't leave, but because they believe Baltimore still has hope. A kind of hope that doesn't rely on the government or billion-dollar projects, but on very small changes. Keeping the sidewalk in front of the house clean, planting more flowers by the porch, or teaching the neighborhood children how to read and write. Can a city be revived if the very people who were once attached to it have now lost faith? And if the retreat continues, where will be the next place to become a ghost town in the heart of America? There's a hard-to-swallow paradox playing out in Baltimore, and perhaps in many other cities across the United States. Social welfare budgets are not small, but the results are baffling. Each year, hundreds of millions of dollars are poured into programs supporting the homeless, public health care, rental assistance, and education. But when you step onto streets like North Avenue or Park Heights, what you see are long lines of people sleeping on the sidewalks, families crammed into makeshift buildings, and children growing up without ever feeling safe. Baltimore once prided itself on being a city that cared about the underprivileged. But it seems that over time, that system has become patched together and weary. Support policies seem to be caught in a loop of bureaucracy, stagnation, and lack of coordination. Some people applied for medical assistance but didn't receive a response for months. Some families are approved for housing assistance, but the waiting list is endless, while thousands of abandoned homes sit empty right next to them. Part of the reason lies in the very way the system operates. Many local organizations have warned that funding is fragmented. Instead of interagency coordination to create real impact, each program pursues its own goals, leading to overlap and inefficiency. There are people who receive support from 3 different programs, but none of the programs are enough to lift them out of poverty sustainably. Some initiatives, such as the Electronic Benefit Transfer (EBT) food card, linked to retailers like Walmart, Target, or Instacart, have expanded access. But there are still issues with usage in neighborhoods with few large stores or weak public transportation networks. A small glimmer of hope might come from independent non-profit organizations like United Way or Feeding America that are working to fill the gaps left by policy. Mobile food banks, free health services organized by CVS Health, and the transitional housing model in partnership with Airbnb for Good are demonstrating the potential of a community-based approach, flexible, connected, and practical. But will these piecemeal solutions be enough to retain the trust of a generation that is losing hope? And if the root causes of the problem aren't addressed, from a shortage of affordable housing and deteriorating education to unemployment and mental health, the dollars spent will be like water poured on sand. Between fragile hope and harsh reality, will this city be reborn, or will it continue to be forgotten? Baltimore was once likened to the backbone of the East, a place with a bustling port, developed industry, and a strong labor community. But now, this city stands at a precarious crossroads, between promises of reform and crumbling reality, between reconstruction plans and the deep-seated skepticism of its residents. Over the past few years, authorities and businesses have been working to revitalize Baltimore with new planning initiatives, mixed-use developments, and technology initiatives. Some downtown areas are seeing the rise of small startups, shared workspaces like WeWork, or high-end housing projects funded by the Amazon Housing Equity Fund and the JP Morgan Chase Urban Investment. New buildings with modern glass facades rise beside the mottled walls of the old housing complex, creating a strange contrast, like two Baltimores existing in parallel without ever touching. In reality, despite certain advancements, the majority of city residents, especially in areas like West Baltimore, Cherry Hill, or Greenmount East, have yet to experience real change. When a new apartment costs over $10,000 per month and rises next to an abandoned building with an average income below $40,000 per year, the gap is not just material, it's also about trust. The future of Baltimore, if you look at the investment figures and the master plan, might seem bright. But if you listen to the voices of the people, those who truly live, grow up, and grow old within the cracked walls of the past, you will see a different reality. A future that remains uncertain, where every effort risks being overwhelmed without genuine consensus and true fairness. Can a city be revived? If that revival is only for a small, privileged segment of the population, and when the people who make up the soul of Baltimore, the workers, the teachers, the laborers, no longer believe in the promise of the future, what will keep this city standing? There are places that are no longer simply a city. They have become symbols, a precise reflection of what a nation is avoiding. Baltimore, in the eyes of many, is playing that role. A rough but very real sketch of America's future without fundamental changes. Because what's happening here? From persistent poverty rates, population decline, piles of abandoned buildings, to the absence of an effective welfare system, is no longer just the story of one locality. Issues once considered urban exceptions are now beginning to appear in many other cities, from Cleveland to St. Louis, from Detroit to the south side of Chicago. Perhaps what troubles many people most isn't the data, but the widespread feeling of helplessness, that society is becoming too complex to be fixed simply. As inequality continues to rise, as rents far outpace average incomes, and as trust in public policy is no longer enough to keep people connected to the city, we begin to see the spectre of a fragmented nation. Some tech companies like Google.org, Salesforce, and LinkedIn Learning are now funding skills training programs in cities like Baltimore. They believe that if they invest in people first, the system can restructure itself from the ground up. Digital skills, basic techniques, and programming courses are offered free of charge to young people through platforms like Coursera, Udemy, or local partner centers. But the impact is still very limited, because urban infrastructure, social psychology, and structural inequality remain enormous barriers. Baltimore is also seeing experiments in human-centered urbanization, with local businesses like Impact Hub, discount supermarket chains like Aldi, and community healthcare systems like One Medical trying to maintain trust within the community. But the question is, will those small-scale efforts be enough to reverse a trend that has been decades in the making? If Baltimore is a warning, will we dare to listen? And if a city can reflect the nation's future, are we witnessing a prediction, or are we inadvertently writing that very script? Baltimore, a city once a symbol of American faith, labor, and aspiration, is now grappling with the very questions this nation has yet to answer. How can we preserve the urban soul in an era of rising inequality? How can we ensure that no one is left behind as the engine of development continues to move forward? Perhaps the most concerning thing isn't the numbers, but the silence. The silence of the once bustling neighborhoods has become desolate. The silence of dreams has worn thin with waiting. And the silence of each of us as we witness a city fall without knowing what else we can do. What do you think? Is Baltimore a warning or a glimpse into the future of the entire United States? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to tell stories that not everyone is willing to listen to, but everyone needs to know. Each share is an opportunity to add one more person who understands. one more person who cares, and one more ray of hope for those whose lives are lived in silence. This video is not intended to condemn any organization, individual, or political group. All information presented is based on publicly available data, official reports, and field observations from multiple perspectives. The stories, images, and perspectives presented are educational in nature, reflecting social realities to stimulate constructive discussion without creating incitement, panic, or generalizations. We do not condone any illegal behavior whatsoever. We do not normalize suffering, and we do not turn human misery into entertainment. This is not a conclusion, but an invitation to reflect together, to dialogue together, and to hold on to the remaining humanity within each of us.